Good afternoon, boys and girls. Mrs. Disidores here to read the first and second grade Read Aloud, Gooney Bird Greene. Okay, and today is Friday, April 17th. So far, all we've only read chapter 1, and Gooney Bird is a new second grade student at Water Tower Elementary School. And she came in and isn't very shy. She's wearing a unique style and a unique hairdo, meaning she's very different from everyone. But all the students are kind of interested in her. They want to learn more about her. And in chapter 1, their teacher, Mrs. Pigeon, is teaching them how to write a story. And they have to choose a character, and the class chose Gooney Bird as their character to write about. So let's see what happens in chapter 2. Gooney Bird adjusted the pink ballet tutu she was wearing over a pair of green stretch pants. Her t-shirt was decorated with polka dots. Her red hair was pulled into 2 pigtails and held there with blue scrunchies. Kind of looks like this outfit on the front cover, doesn't it? She pulled carefully on one of her pigtails, rearranging it neatly, because the scrunchie was coming loose. She felt her earlobes, which were small and pink and empty. I should have worn the dangling diamond earrings that I got from the prince, she told the class. Maybe I'll wear them next week. Diamond earrings? Prince? Mrs. Pigeon asked. Well, actually, the prince didn't give me the earrings. I got them at the palace, Gooney Bird explained. Why were you at the palace? Well, first I was in jail, and then Gooney Bird interrupted herself. It's a long story. She reached down and tidied her socks. So Gooney Bird is telling the class a story, and I find that it's probably a made-up story, which tells me that she has a pretty good imagination. May I come up to the front of the room to begin my story? She asked the teacher after she had adjusted her clothes. I like to be absolutely the center of attention. Mrs. Pigeon nodded and stepped aside so that there was room for Gooney Bird to stand in front of the class. You might as well sit down, Mrs. Pigeon, Gooney Bird said politely. Take a load off your feet. Mrs. Pigeon sat down in the chair behind her cluttered desk. She looked at the clock on the wall. We have 15 minutes, she said, before arithmetic. Arithmetic is math, she didn't know. And there she is, adjusting her pigtails. So Gooney Bird is going to be the character in this story, so she's telling them a little bit about herself. Class, Gooney Bird said, you heard Mrs. Pigeon. We have just 15 minutes. There are many Gooney Bird stories I might tell you, but I have time for only one today. Who has a suggestion for a story? Ben's hand shot up. Tell about how you came from China, he said. Nicholas called, Why are you named Gooney Bird? Chelsea was wiggling and wiggling her feet. The palace, she said. Tell about jail and the palace and the diamond earrings. Other hands were waving, but Gooney Bird motioned for those children to put their hands down. She looked around the room, thinking. This is the title of the story, she said at last. How Gooney Bird got her name. Just like how the leopard got its spots, Barry Tuckerman said. Barry, please pay attention, Gooney Bird said. I like to have absolutely all eyes on me. Then, when the class was silent, and all eyes, except those of Felicia Ann, who always looked at the floor, were on her, she began. How Gooney Bird got her name. Once upon a time, 8 years ago, a man and woman named Mrs. and Mr. Greene, that's Greene with a silent E at the end, discovered that they were expecting a baby girl. The man's name was Gordon Greene. His wife was Barbara Greene. They decided to name their baby girl with their initials, G for Gordon, B for Barbara. They thought of many different names. Gail Beck, said Mrs. Greene. She likes short names. Gwendolyn Belinda, said Mr. Greene. He likes long names. They discussed and discussed. They never argued or fought, but they had many discussions. Once, in the middle of the night, Mrs. Greene woke up. She had a dream about a name. She nudged Mr. Greene until he woke up a little bit. Then she said, "Georgina Babette." "No," he said, and went back to sleep. One night, Mr. Greene woke up, nudged his wife, and told her that he had a dream. "Gazpacho banana," he said. "That must have been a nightmare you had," his wife said. He agreed. They both went back to sleep. Finally, because they could not make up their minds about a name, they decided that they would wait until the baby girl was born. Then they would look at the baby, and somehow they would know that her name should be Grace Bridget, or Gloria Bonnie, or some other name. They waited and waited for the baby's birthday. It takes many months, as you know. Gooney Bird paused in her story. She could see that many of the children wanted to wave their hands in the air and say things. "Class," she said, "any comments so far? Any questions?" I think it's very cute that Gooney Bird is acting like the teacher, and I think she's doing a good job, too. "We have 9 minutes left," Mrs. Pigeon reminded them, "before arithmetic." Keiko asked in a small voice, "Did he really say gazpacho banana?" "Yes, he did," Gooney Bird said. "I tell only absolutely true stories." Barry Tuckerman stood up behind his desk. "I was named a B name for my grandfather," he said. "My grandfather's name was Benjamin." "Hey, that's my name," Ben called out. "My grandfather was in college when grandmother went to jail," Barry added, "or he would have gone with her." Trisha raised her hand. "My cat's name is Flutternutter," she said. 4 more minutes, Mrs. Pigeon announced. "Let's let Gooney Bird get back to her story so that we can hear the ending." "Did you notice, class," she added, "how she uses characters and dialogue, and her story is full of suspense? It's a cliffhanger, isn't it? What a good storyteller Gooney Bird is." "Ready?" Gooney Bird asked. "Ready!" shouted the class, all but Felicia Ann, who never shouted. "Okay, here comes the ending." Finally, one spring morning, the baby girl was born. She weighed 6 pounds and 14 ounces. She had red hair. "Look," said her mother. "She wiggles her head around, looking for food when she's hungry. Isn't that cute? It reminds me of something, but I forget what." Her father peered down at the new baby in his wife's arms. He smiled. "She has very big feet. Isn't that cute? It reminds me of something, but I forget what." Mr. and Mrs. Greene looked at their sweet baby. They thought and thought. "It's coming to me," Mr. Greene said at last. "Do you remember when we went on that bird-watching trip to various islands in the Pacific Ocean, and we saw all kinds of marine birds?" "That's it," his wife said. "She looks very much like one of those birds. But which one?" "Let's get our photograph album from that trip," Mr. Greene said. Together they turned the pages of the photo album. And here's a picture of Gooney Bird's mom holding Gooney Bird. And they're just trying to decide her name. "Double-crested cormorant," Mrs. Greene said. They looked down at the baby. "No, she didn't look like a double-crusted cormorant." "Redneck grape?" Mr. Greene suggested. They looked at the baby again. "She does have a red neck," Mr. Greene said. "She does not," said Mrs. Greene. "It's pink." They turned the pages some more. Suddenly they both said, "Oh!" Very carefully they looked at the photograph, and very carefully they looked at the baby. "Big feet," Mr. Greene said, "just like our babies." "A head that bobs around," Mrs. Greene said, "just like our babies." "That's the one," they agreed. They read the label under the photograph. "Laysan albatross," the label said. So they're trying to figure out a name for their baby. Reminds them of a bird. I don't think Laysan Albatross Greene is a very pretty name for a baby girl, Mrs. Greene said sadly. It sounds too scientific. I agree, Mr. Greene said. But look at the small print. Together, Mr. and Mrs. Greene read the words in the small print, often called Gooney Bird. Gooney Bird Greene, they said. I like the sound of it, Mrs. Greene said. And it has a G and a B. It does indeed, said Mr. Greene. So they decided to name their new baby girl Gooney Bird Greene. Then everyone, including a doctor, a midwife, and a cleaning lady, hugged and kissed and did a Viennese waltz together. The end. What a lovely story, Mrs. Pigeon said. And it gives us a chance to do some science research. We will look up lace and albatross in the encyclopedia. Thank you, Gooney Bird. You may take your seat now, and we'll turn to our arithmetic. Wait! Beanie's hand was waving in the air. Yes, Beanie, Mrs. Pigeon asked. What's wrong? I want to hear about the diamond earrings in the palace. That's a different story, Gooney Bird said. She was walking back to her desk. Tell it! The children called. Barry Tuckerman jumped up and stood beside his desk. I want to hear how Gooney Bird came from China, he said. I came on a flying carpet, Gooney Bird said. But that's a different story, too. She adjusted her pink tutu and sat down. Tell it, the children called. Mrs. Pigeon laughed. I'm sure Gooney Bird was just joking about the prince and the palace and the diamond earrings, she said. And the flying carpet, too. Gooney Bird had already opened her arithmetic book. She looked up in surprise. No, she said, I wasn't joking. I tell only absolutely true stories. Well, said Mrs. Pigeon, will you tell us another tomorrow? Of course, Gooney Bird said. Okay, so that's the end of chapter 2. So in chapter 2, she told a story. She told the class a story of how she got her name. And it is entitled, and I'll show you how it was written. In the book, you see how her story is written in different writing and a different font? So that's how I knew she was telling her story this whole time. And there's the title, How Gooney Bird Got Her Name. Okay. And then it went on to the next page. Here's the illustration with more of that same typing, that same font. And then it changes back, and then there's the ending, and it says the end, and then goes on the rest of the Gooney Bird story. So Gooney Bird tells her class a story of how she got her name. And she got her name because her parents, she reminded her parents of a bird that they saw one time when they were on vacation. And it's called a Gooney Bird. Okay, so this has really good elements of a story, too, that Mrs. Pigeon pointed out. It has characters in her story that makes it interesting. She also had dialogue in her story, meaning that the story had people talking. And it also had a beginning and a middle and an end. Okay, so not only are we able to listen to a fun read aloud, we're also able to tell the elements of a story. All right, so I hope you enjoyed this chapter, and I hope you have a wonderful weekend, and we'll pick up with chapter 3 tomorrow. Have a great weekend. Miss you all.